Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NextGen Planners podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm the head of and marketing here at NextGen Planners. And today, I'm delighted to be joined all the way from the United States, and this is going to be a really good one, by Dr. Kristy Archuleta from the University of Georgia. How are you doing today, Kristy? And just to let you know, you're on mute. There we go.
Yes, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a real pleasure to have you here. We were actually involved in some content 2 years ago as part of our virtual conference that we did, and it's a real kind of shocking shame that we haven't had you on the podcast yet, because you've got some fantastic things to say. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. Christy's actually been at Shift, which is a conference. If you haven't checked it out, it's a conference in the United States for financial professionals, and she's been there for the last 2 days, and she's just been filling me in about how amazing it was and making me feel even worse in terms of my FOMO. So go and check that out as well, by the way, everybody. So for anyone who doesn't know, Kristy, she is a professor, researcher, speaker and author, and she's an expert in financial therapy and financial psychology, which is a real growing area in our profession at the moment, as everybody in the audience will probably know. But to kick things off, Kristy, before we get into any of that kind of stuff, can you just tell us a little bit about what a day in the life of Kristy looks like and the things that you get up to on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I was actually thinking about this question, and I was like, what do I do on a daily basis? It really is very different sometimes from day to day, because I am a professor. So my full-time job is as a professor at the University of Georgia. And what that really means is that I teach and I do research. So I have a 50-50 appointment. But on top of that, I'm also our department's graduate coordinator. And I serve on several different committees within the department and the college and the university. And so when you're a tenured full professor, those are some of the things that you get to do in addition to doing the teaching and research. And so day in life looks a little bit different, depends really on the day of the week that it is. And so one day you might be finding me prepping for my class and then teaching that class in the afternoon. Actually, both of my classes this semester in the afternoon. So prepping in the morning, teaching in the afternoon. And then on the other days, really meeting with students, supervising our students in our Aspire clinic, because that is one of the courses that I teach. The students are working in our Aspire clinic. And I have fabulous communication coaches that I also work with, mentoring doctoral students, master's students, and then also conducting research and writing. And it really varies from day to day.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, literally everything in there, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Oh, that sounds cool. Oh, that sounds cool. It's like I could probably ask you about every single aspect of those, but it sounds like a really fulfilling kind of thing that you're doing at the moment, and you can see the passion dripping from it when you're talking. So it's really, really cool. So just to kind of get on to what we're talking about today, and so this is a huge area, and I want to do it right, and I want us to talk about it in a way that makes sense to everybody. But it's certainly something that has grown over the past few years. You guys in the US are actually ahead of us, as you usually are, ahead of us here in the UK. But it's the importance of psychology in financial planning. And if we were to plot ourselves back 30 years and say, oh, we're going to look at psychology in financial planning today. I mean, firstly, people would say, what's financial planning? And then they would say, well, surely that's, what are you talking about? Like, that's not important. So it shows really how far we've moved, but we could argue that it has taken far too long for us to realize how important psychology is in financial planning. And I think you would probably agree with that. But just from your perspective, like, how far do you think we've actually moved forward as a profession when we're starting now to realize that psychology is a huge part of the financial planning process? And what does it kind of tell you about how we're moving along?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question, because I'm in this and I talk to people all the time about this topic. So I'd like to think like everybody's thinking this way. But the reality is that I think we really have only, touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of recognizing that the psychological factors, the human factors, have a huge impact in what we do as financial planners. And so when I'm working with students, I like to remind them, and actually for some of them, this is the first time they even, recognize that this is an important concept, is that what those numbers that show up in a financial plan, I mean, whether you're thinking about cash flow or net worth, statement of balance sheet, whatever it is that you're really working with, a portfolio, is that those numbers are driven by people's behaviors. And those behaviors are what we see, but those behaviors are also driven by how we think and process our values and attitudes and how we feel about things. And a lot of that stuff doesn't make really a lot of sense. And so when we're like, well, this client is not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're making dumb decisions, there's a reason behind that. And so if we spent some time uncovering that, then that is huge. I mean, that totally changes the way you're going to work with that client, how you help them envision what their financial plan is. It might even like redirect how you get to their goals. And so you're going to have a much more robust financial plan that can be implemented by the client in a way that fits for them. And so I really do think that we're just kind of at the very cusp of recognizing, like, yeah, this is important. So in the US, the CFP board has put into their standards the psychology of financial planning. And so that's like, that in and of itself for us here in the US is a huge deal. But we have so many that just don't even recognize or don't want to recognize that that's an important aspect. And we're not really, our programs are not, most of the programs are just kind of dabbling in that a little bit in terms of training students and the education piece of it. So it's kind of being tacked on as like, okay, now we have to add this on. But there are some programs like that is like the core of the program. It's like really, I say core, but what I really mean is like it is an integrated core part of the program where the technical skills plus the human elements are really combined in a way that help planners be trained differently, to think differently about their clients, and ultimately have better outcomes with their clients.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly one thing is the actionable part of financial planning becomes a lot more successful when you understand someone's behavior and the way they are likely to behave, and that kind of. But it all, like you mentioned in what you were talking about there, you mentioned about the power of understanding this kind of stuff when it comes to understanding what they want to do with their lives, which I don't think. I mean, this might hopefully this isn't a controversial opinion, but I don't think you can tell somebody what to do with their finances or advise them on their money until you understand what they want to do with their life. I mean, that's just the way. And to understand what they want to do with their life, you really need to understand their emotions, their behaviors, the way they think about things, the way they think about the world, the way they look at the world, and that is psychology. That's all. It's not, it's not scientific psychology, but it's a huge part of the human kind of with the way that we are animals at the end of the day, and we all think in different ways and stuff. So I think, to be honest, when I think about this kind of stuff, I think it does, to me, it just feels like that kind of natural thing that we're heading towards a more of a profession than what we've been used to in the past, which is great, and it fills me with a lot of optimism, and hopefully a lot of people in the audience as well. But the you kind of mentioned it in what you were talking about there, but I think the danger is that a lot of people still see this as a kind of add-on or an additional service or like some kind of novelty thing that is new, and it is new, but it almost feels a bit like a commodity at the moment, and something not everybody does. And for those people in the audience who are a bit skeptical, or for those people in the audience who haven't really bought into the idea of the importance of this yet, what do you see as kind of like if we could think of the headline benefits of really kind of integrating this psychology elements into financial planning? What would you say to people to convince them that it is really, really important?
Well, I'd actually pose a question: is it ethical not to? I was having a conversation. This was actually at Shift yesterday. Carl Richards and I were part of a panel together, and we had an amazing conversation with, I guess, 300 of our closest friends watching. This is what it ended up being.
Yeah.
And I asked the question, I was like, is it ethical for us not to be doing these things? And the reason that I asked that is because, is it ethical for us to do something when we don't understand something about our clients? So how can we create plans when we don't understand what our clients' needs and wants, and how this plan really will fit within their lives? And so that's my question. That might sound really on the fringes of like, this is kind of, what's this crazy lady talking about? But it's an important thing that I think we have to ask ourselves, because how can we do what's in the best interest of our clients when we don't understand what our clients' best interests are? And so that to me is a very important question we need to be asking ourselves, which totally changes the trajectory of potentially where we go with this, and how important the psychology of financial planning, psychology of money, the relational aspects of money and people and their money is to the planning process.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question, and I think, to be honest, it kind of ties on to what I was saying when I was talking previously about, I don't really see how you can do financial planning without understanding, like exactly what you said there, all of those kind of different aspects of their lives. There's a fantastic tool that we've been talking about on the podcast recently, and it's the guys it's Lumient, and it's Santi. I don't know if you've heard of Lumient. It's like an amazing value-led tool for financial planners to use with their clients. And actually, it doesn't even talk about anything to do with their clients' money in that process at all. It talks about their values. It talks about what they want to do with their lives. It talks about all these kind of different anti-goals and stuff like that, that they're things they don't want to happen. And it's ridiculously powerful. And it kind of just, you mentioned before, you said the word shift, and not just in reference to the amazing event that you keep on reminding me that you were at and I wasn't, by the way.
Sorry, I apologize.
But if it's shifting the conversation away from the kind of the money and the investments, which, don't get me wrong, is still crucially important. I think we would all agree with that, don't we? Investing and understanding
Absolutely.
money is still huge. It's not replacing that. It is just focusing the conversation, kind of flipping the conversation a little bit towards, firstly, we need to understand what you want to do, and then, and only then, can we look at where your money fits into this thing. And when you mention it that simply, you think, why isn't it always been done like this? I mean, we can regret a little bit about the past if we want to, but instead we should probably just look forward, shouldn't we? And you summarized it brilliantly when you said that the CFP boards added it to its syllabus and all that kind of stuff, which is brilliant. But when we look at the exams and the kind of qualifications apart from the CFP, so for instance, in the UK, we have the level 4 diploma and the level 6 diploma, and so on and so forth. It doesn't really teach you how to be a financial planner or an effective financial planner. It doesn't teach you how to communicate with clients, but it certainly doesn't teach you how to understand their feelings, their behaviors, their thoughts about money. And I think that's probably a real issue that we've got to get to the heart of. So how, this is a huge question, by the way, Kristy, and I don't expect you to have all the answers, but how do you think that we can make sure that it's not just the CFP that does this kind of stuff? It's implemented everywhere. And for instance, you're involved in a university that looks at financial planning, for instance. In the UK, we only have a handful. I think it's less than 5 universities that even offer financial planning as a degree. And it's not really a degree that sets people up. It's just a degree that gives an understanding of financial planning. Yeah. So how do you think that we can tackle that? How do you think we get this into more training programs around our profession everywhere in the world?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question that we're still looking for the answers for. And like I mentioned before, just because the CFP board put those into the standards, it doesn't mean that most students are getting a robust training in this particular area and how to really incorporate that. They're probably getting some elements of some concepts. but not to the going to implement. So how do we do that? So I think one of the promising things for me is we do have more to us than we did even 5 years ago. And the conversation has shifted. I'm sorry to use that shift word again, but it's transitioned in the last couple of years. I think COVID really brought to light how connected people, relationships, family relationships, couple relationships, behaviors, attitudes, how we think about money, how we feel about it is actually connected to what we do with our money. And so COVID really brought that to light during everything being shut down during the pandemic. And so I think that actually this is my personal opinion. I really think that has helped kind of catapult this area forward. I think there were talks about it, but it really like made it go forward faster. And for more people to recognize that all of these elements are interrelated. So with that being said, there are more resources available. There are more books that are out there. There are more CE credits that are available, whether in person or online, virtually, that anyone could access, that do talk about these sorts of issues and really how you can implement them alongside your work as a financial planner. And then going back to the education piece, so I would say that most of our CFP programs that we have here in the US are probably very similar to what you have in the UK. It is your straightforward technical knowledge of how to be a financial planner, those tools and skills that you need to have, and then to sit for the CFP exam and pass it, right? There are some psychology of financial planning questions on the exam now, so people are having to at least like look at the stuff, but it's not like it's a strong piece of most curriculum. Now, you go to some of our larger CFP programs in the United States, University of Georgia being one of them, Kansas State University, Texas Tech University, some of those universities where they are housed in what we call, I'm going to say our college here at the University of Georgia is called the College of Family and Consumer Sciences. And so it's really like a human sciences college. And so at the heart of what we're doing is really helping people. And so that element is just naturally part of what we do. And at Georgia, for years, there's these opportunities that have been available to learn about at least really have very strong communication skills with clients. And now being able to have a focus really on therapeutic aspects of working as a financial planner. Like, how do you incorporate those pieces to make an impact on clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you answered my ridiculously harsh and enormous question very, very well, to be honest.
We have a lot of work to do, though.
Yeah, I think that's
more work to do.
That's kind of what I was going to say, is that we're left pondering in a way, and almost left with just a huge task on our task list of things that we need to do. But yeah, I think I completely agree with everything you said in there, and something you did say in there, which leads me on to nicely what I wanted to talk to you about next is when we have our initial conversations and when we were kind of putting this podcast episode together, you said something which really stuck with me, and it's you said that financial planning is a therapeutic process. And I mean, to be honest, I mean, when you said that, I've had my mind changed a lot over the years, as you can probably imagine, but that really did switch my thinking away, and it kind of made me more passionate about the fact that financial planning is more than we think it might be. But can you give us an idea of what you mean when you say that? What do you mean when you say financial planning is a therapeutic process?
Yeah. So when I say that is, when we're trying, one of the most, let me start back here. So one of the most important aspects of helping your clients is really that relationship you have with your clients. The stronger that alliance between client and planner, the more likely that client's going to stick with you. They might be more likely to take your recommendations, and more likely they might to be to implement those that advice that you're giving. And so that relationship piece is a huge piece. And so that mirrors very well with the therapeutic process. So as a background, so for all the listeners, as a background, my master's and my PhD are in marriage and family therapy with an emphasis in financial planning. And so I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and the process is very similar. We're helping clients get from where they are now to where they want to be. And part of that process is helping clients make changes. And change, I really think about change being very broad. I think about it very broadly. It can be very small changes that need to be made. It can be very large changes that need to be made. Change can look like doing something different that you haven't done before. It can be doing something more of something that's really good for you, that's helpful. But it really doesn't mean like doing nothing. And sometimes I use the metaphor of like crawling underneath a rock. It doesn't mean like hiding and not doing anything about it. It's change means something along that continuum. And it can be easy changes, and it can also be very difficult changes to make. But as planners, that's what we're doing. We're helping clients get from where they are now to where they want to be in the future, and we're helping facilitate that. And so when we say these are my recommendations for you, do these things, and then they don't ever do them, well, there's probably a reason as to why they're not doing them. Maybe it's a change that they're not ready to make. Maybe it's a change that's too difficult to make. Maybe it's a change that doesn't fit very well for them. And so they're not going to do it. And so instead of saying, well, they just won't do what I asked them to do, and if they would do these things, then they would be fine. It's much more than that. And that's why this psychological aspect and why these therapeutic pieces are so important. And so sometimes people hear, oh, well, my gosh, I don't want to be a therapist with my clients. But that's not at all what I'm saying. That to be therapeutic means to be a human. Like, it means to be human. It means to hold space for someone else in order to support them to get them where they need to go. So you're not treating them for depression or anxiety or marital conflict. When those sorts of things rise and those are out of your wheelhouse or out of your purview of what you're able to do, but they're getting in the way of your clients implementing their financial plan or making progress towards their goals that they have said are their goals, then those are times where you can refer out to a mental health therapist, for example.
Yeah.
That might have been
No,
more than what you just asked.
no, it's brilliant. I think because the whole time well, not the whole time you were talking, but it really does bring to front of my mind some of those kind of case studies over the years when I used to work in a financial planning business of thinking, it is therapy ultimately.
Yeah.
I can remember people coming in and, almost kind of, you could see the stress and the anxiety that these money issues were causing them in their eyes. You could see it in the sweat on their brow. You could see as soon as we started talking about these kind of things, they would move around in their seat really uncomfortable and that kind of stuff. And then by the end of this process, therapeutic process, they're a completely different person. And they're, not just in terms of their personality, but in terms of the way that they look at life, the way they look at their money and everything like that. And it does kind of, it hammers home the fact that the more you think about this, the more it actually does look like a therapeutic and feel like a therapeutic process. Which
Yeah.
again, if we step back into, I'm just thinking, by the way, if somebody from the 1980s or 1990s who was practicing financial advice were to listen to what we were saying right now, I can guarantee they would probably laugh at us and and that
Oh,
kind of.
absolutely. 100%. 10
But in a
years
way
ago, they
that,
would have laughed at us because they
yeah, I
did
mean,
laugh at us.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, there's probably people in the audience now who are laughing at
Yeah,
us, but
for
in a
sure.
way that actually fills me with optimism, because you can't get anywhere by remaining the status quo. You can't get anywhere by just not saying anything that people feel a bit uncomfortable about. Um, and yeah, it actually fills me with a lot more optimism than I thought it would, which is a nice thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned there about financial therapy.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of thinking, there are obvious kind of switchovers here between that and financial planning. But if you could think about those years that you've worked in financial therapy and things that you've really learned over the years, or the most important thing that you've picked up on over those years about financial therapy, can you kind of portray that to the audience of what is the most important thing that you've learned about that financial therapy
Ooh,
aspect?
that's a really hard question, I
Mm.
think,
I
because
have
there's
been
so
known for
much.
that before. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's just so much. Um, Before I go there, I want to go back to what we were talking about just a minute ago about the therapeutic process and how this is a therapeutic process. And I want advisors to recognize the significance that they play in their clients' lives. Because if you have really developed a strong, trusting relationship with your clients, they're going to feel really comfortable in telling you things that they might never have told anyone else, because they're already telling you about one of the most intimate pieces of their lives, which is their financial situation and their money and what they're doing well and what they're not doing well. And even if they don't tell you, like, I'm doing these dumb things, you can see that this is showing up. So you hold such a significant role in your clients' lives, and they're going to probably share with you some things that might feel uncomfortable and you don't know what to do about that. And that's when it's important to recognize, like, what are you trained to do? What are you not trained to do? And how can you take that, what could be an awkward conversation, and be human about it? And be that therapeutic person about it and hold that space so that you can get them from where they are and what they're telling you to where they need to be, and maybe who they need to be working with in order to talk that out. And maybe it's just that they needed to say something out loud and talk it out loud with someone, and you're just there to listen. So I think one of the most important things from a financial therapy space, and I'm going to go back, this is probably like 15 or more years ago, that I was very naive doctoral student, and in a marriage and family therapy program. I had two major professors. I had one from the marriage and family therapy program and one from the financial planning program. And I remember my financial planning major professor saying, he recognized, like, we were learning all of these theoretically informed approaches to working with clients. It's all about, how do you help clients change? That's what therapy is about. How do you help clients change? And he was like, I can't believe that you have all of these things. And for the first time, I recognized planners weren't even trained to communicate, like you mentioned earlier, not even trained to communicate well with their clients. And so those who were actually doing well as financial advisors had some sort of natural ability to be able to communicate with people, had a natural ability to formulate relationships with people, but no real way to recognize or know what to do if they got stuck. And so that's where these theoretically informed approaches that have evidence and science that back them up in terms of how they work and that they do work. And so I think that's one of the things that I've learned is that and something to your point that you made earlier is like, this can't be really an add-on. It really needs to be an integrated process, starting with the way we look at clients, the way we think about how clients make changes. And when I think about how clients make changes, how they work towards their goals. There's very rarely you're going to have a client that's going to come in and say, my goal is to reduce my spending by 15.34% and increase my savings by 20%. And I would like to have a diversified portfolio with allocated in these specific areas. That's not realistic goals that clients come up with. That might be your goals that you place on the clients. And they might think I need to save more or I need to spend less, whatever. They might kind of know that they might need to have a diversified portfolio because a friend or a buddy told them. But more often, they're looking for a sense of freedom or a sense of security or a sense of stability and a sense of not worrying. That's really their goals. Or they're looking to be able to spend more time with their families. So these are the things that clients are really wanting, but we as planners have said, these are your goals instead. So if we were to really help, and the outcome might end up being that they worry less, but the clients haven't taken an active part of that process. So when we empower our clients to engage in the process and to be able to be a part of making those changes in a way that works for them, it's going to be a more successful outcome in the end. It might mean having a different kind of conversation with your clients. It might mean spending a little bit more time with your clients. But in the end, the outcome I almost said product, but the product is not really what I meant in terms of how we think about product and financial services. The outcome is probably going to be much more successful and satisfying for both your client and for you as the advisor, as someone who genuinely cares, assuming that everyone that listens to this podcast genuinely cares about their clients.
Well, that is a wonderful summary of what people should be focusing. I think what people should be focusing on when speaking with clients is it's almost focusing on the issue rather than the symptoms or the solutions of the issue. So like you said it perfectly, that the issue is not that people want to save more into their pension. I talk about this loads. That's a symptom of or a solution to what they may need to do. Yeah. That's not an objective of what they want to do. Their objective is that they want to basically they want to be able to see as much of their children as they possibly can when they turn age 60. And that means having all of the things that we need. They are the features and the solutions that we have. But I agree with you that it's not an objective. It's not a goal that they want to achieve. And you've just summarized it perfectly. If we could get that into people right from the very beginning, because I think most people or most good financial planners have that epiphany at some point. They realize, hang on a second, it's much deeper than what I think it is. But imagine if we learned that from day one rather than just having to figure it out at some point. The quality of financial planning would raise massively in our profession as well. So it was a lovely summary. I want to talk a little bit about the something that you've actually specialized in, and something that you talk about quite often with audiences is the idea of taking couples through financial planning. And I've got a little bit, we both kind of did a wry smile, because we know, don't we, that it's kind of it's a bit of a cheeky thing really, because I mean, obviously you mentioned before that you're a licensed marriage and family therapist and stuff like that. And sometimes the amount of times I hear financial planners say to me, sometimes this feels like I'm a marriage counselor or something like that when they're going through things with couples. And it's true. A lot of people are saying things in front of their spouse, in front of their husband, wife, whatever it might be, that they've never said before. They've never said it out loud. They've only had these feelings in their head, and now they're saying them in front of a complete stranger, in front of their spouse. And I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. It is really, really mad.
Yep.
So what tips would you give? Again, we could go on for hours about this, but what kind of were the biggest things that you try and tell people about working with couples who are going through financial planning, and just some things to remember, and just some things to kind of to focus on next time we're advising clients who are couples?
Yeah. So just a kind of a tidbit. So I think this is actually how I got interested in this space, is because I probably got bonus points in a class one time to go watch these marriage and family therapists give a talk. They came to the university and they were giving a talk, and I'm sure it was a class requirement or I got bonus points. And anyway, it was the first time that I had ever heard that couples, one of their biggest issues that they have conflict over is money. And I thought, this is the perfect way I can blend my interest in what was at accounting at the time. So just kind of like transfer that into like personal finance and my desire to become a marriage and family therapist. It's like, wow, I could really help couples with their money issues, not having any idea that that wasn't an actual like profession or anything that anyone did. So, but then I've also heard financial advisors say, you know, I'm in the business of saving marriages because I help them with their finances. And doing exactly what you just mentioned is having these conversations that these couples have never had before. I did at one point in my career, I did a lot of premarital counseling with couples, and so it was always very interesting to me to hear couples talk about how they had never talked about money. And so that was like a huge piece of what we discussed was, all right, let's get familiar. Let's talk about how you feel about it, your attitudes, your values. Let's look at what debts you're bringing into the relationship. And so that there's not any big surprises when you do actually get married. And so working with couples is different, right? Because I always like to say, you know, when you're working with a client, let's think about just an individual client. If you're working with an individual client, you're not just working with that individual. That might be the person who's sitting in front of you in your office or on your screen, but you are working with a network of people that are part of this person's life that has influenced the way they think, feel, and behave with their money. Yeah. And so when you are working with a couple, you are working with two people and their individual networks. And then not only with that, their individual networks, including family, friends, etc., communities, you're working with that couple's dynamic that they have with one another. And so I think it's easy, and it's been kind of more of the traditional approach where we have in financial planning, where we have tended to focus in on the person who talks the most, right? And so they're the ones who seem to be more knowledgeable about the financial situation. In the US, that tends to be if it's a heterosexual couple, it tends to be the man in the relationship. And so but that he might not actually be the most knowledgeable person about their financial situation, because a lot of times it's the wife or the female partner who has done like the day-to-day types of management that keeps them afloat from month to month. So kind of in thinking about this dynamic, it's really important that regardless of who's the most vocal person, that we give time to each person in the relationship. We make eye contact, we hold space for them to talk, and it might actually be in that couple's pattern of behavior where the one will just always talk for the other person. And so you have to kind of question, like, what is going on in that dynamic, and what's kind of being suppressed. And I think that's something to pay attention to, but making sure that that person who doesn't seem to have as much of a voice, or maybe who seems a little bit more quiet or shy or reserved, that you're holding space for that person. You're asking that person the exact same questions you're asking that other person as well. And like you mentioned, for some couples, this might be the first time they've ever had some conversations like this. And that is going to be, could be potentially very difficult and awkward for you as that third party who never received any training in working with couples ever before, to be able to help facilitate this conversation that they've never had before.
Yeah. It's absolutely fascinating and really useful tips there, Kristy. I'm so sorry to mention these guys again. Actually, I'm not even sorry, because they're a brilliant organization. But Lumient, for instance, Lumient's whole kind of thing that they target on is the non-financial, it's the non-CFO in the couple. So they really try and focus on what does the person who doesn't talk the most want, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to power this and run with this actual plan that we put in place. And it's fascinating. It's like you said, we always assume that the person who's talking the most knows the most, but actually, like you said it perfectly, Kristy, that does not apply to everyone at all.
It sure does not.
I mean, people will probably be the audience now, will be thinking, yeah, I know, Dan, because you've been talking for the last 100 episodes about things that you don't have a clue about, but let's just not talk about me. We're talking about something else. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, those tips that you've just given us. I think it makes me think back again to so many conversations that I've had with clients in the past, and just thinking, if I knew these things now, it would open so much more, and I would have dig deeper and things like that. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
And I'm actually thinking about this software. So I'm not familiar with the software, so I'll put that out there for all the listeners. But what it sounds like it could do, or other assessment tools that you might utilize. So there's lots of software tools out there available, and there's lots of assessments out there that you could potentially utilize to kind of figure out where clients are with their values, their attitudes around money, etc. And so I think what tools like this do is that it gives you as the advisor, I want to say kind of a leg up, but it helps you be able to figure out where are these partners, where do they differ, and where do we need to spend some time figuring out what are our commonalities. And so if we can focus in on what are our commonalities, then we're going to be much more successful in getting those. And when I say our commonalities, the couple's commonalities, the two partners' commonalities, what they really want to focus in on, what can they agree on is focus for them that they can do together, and recognize that they might also have individual goals that are different. So how can those be worked into the plan, but that there's something that is shared. So when we have shared goals and values, or a couple has shared goals and values, their satisfaction as a couple is going to go up, and their financial satisfaction is going to go up as well.
Yeah. When I was talking to Santi, who is Lumient's CEO, he literally said, if you talk about this kind of stuff, you've got them. And that is so true. Once you bring those into the conversation, your whole relationship with them changes completely, because you're now now part of that network, rather than talking to that network, which it completely changes things. It really, really does. I should be a brand ambassador for Lumient. I talk about them all the time.
I think you should. You're doing a great job today.
I'm not paid by them, by the way, as well. I just love them to bits. So another thing that we like to think about on the podcast is, and we're probably closing things up now, Kristy, just because I'm aware how busy you are, is, so we've talked a bit today about how 10 years ago in our profession, for instance, I call it a profession as well, by the way. Some people are still quite not ready to call it a profession yet. I do, but let's just
I call it a profession as well. And I have a colleague, John Grable, who is very adamant that this is a profession. This is not, we're not building things. We're not in an industry. We are a profession. So I think we're all right on track.
Good. Yeah. Okay. So, but again, we do like to look back and think, what it used to look like and how far have we come and stuff like that. But also what we like to do, we're called NextGen planners. So we like to think about the next step of our profession. So I kind of will, I'm assuming what you're going to say, but you might throw me off completely. But what are you most excited to see in the world of financial planning in the next 10 years? I know we're limited it to 10 years just because that's kind of in the near future. What are you most excited to see over that next decade?
Yeah. So when I think about the next 10 years, so I think about where we were 10 years ago, and there were several of us doing this type of work, but really like kind of being kind of put to the side. Like some people thought it was like potentially important and some thought it was not important. I think what we're seeing today is that we're starting to recognize that it is important. And so 10 years from now, I would like to see education for our future financial planners to change, to look differently than it does now, and for us to really like integrate. I'm going to go back to that word integrate. I've been saying that a lot over the last few days, because to your point earlier, it's not an add-on. It's an integral part of what we do. We have tended to call communication skills soft skills, and I hate that word. I hate the word soft skills because that makes it sound like it's not important, but it's actually the most important thing you can do as a planner. And
Yeah.
so it's completely essential. And so recognizing that it's even beyond communication skills, that we're able to really service our clients in a way where we are empowering them to live better financial lives and ultimately overall well-being, like have higher improved overall well-being. So that, for kind of cliche, a little, they're living their best lives.
Oh, I love that. There's a great company here in the UK called Best Life Financial Planning, and shout out to Joe Froud, who's their director. I mean, I think that's a fantastic name for a business, because that is what, I mean, it is cliche, but it's what financial planners, it's what the people in the audience do, and yeah, I think I love that kind of optimistic outlook for the future. I definitely think it's coming. To be honest, Chris, I think it's here actually. It is. I think it's. I mean, if nothing else, it's
very fringes.
yeah. I think it's
I want to see it go deeper.
even if, I mean, there's, for instance, there's loads of different things out there that are coming in now about helping financial planners to actually understand this stuff, which tells you that there is a market for it, and it is growing, and it's something that people are interested in. So I definitely think there's areas to be optimistic about. Another question that we always like to ask our guests is for something that has helped them in their career so far. So it can be a book, it can be, I don't know, an album, it can be a podcast episode. I mean, most people go with a book because quite a lot of the people we have are big readers. So, but what would you say has really changed your thinking, or what would you recommend to our audience that could help them in their thinking?
Wow.
Apart from your own research papers, by the way, which are
Yeah, you should just go Google all my research papers. Some people would think that would put them to sleep at night. I was actually just thinking, like, in grad school, I read this book called Soul Searching by Bill Doherty, and it had a really huge impact in kind of how I thought about things. It has nothing to do with financial planning, and it's many years old now. But I walked away. It's probably one of the only books that I can remember, like, anything specifically about eons later, where at the core of it was like, as helpers, we need to be caring. We need to be genuine. We need to care for our clients. We need to have courage to say the things that need to be said, even if we have to challenge them at times. And we need to be prudent, meaning we need to know when is the right time to do those things. And I think for me, that's kind of like, if I think of a book that like has stuck with me because I can remember those elements of it, that's probably the book that I would say. In this space now, there are so many books that out there now that are great, and I almost am like, I I hate not to say one because there's several out there that are really excellent. I'll tell you that in one of my classes, I'm utilizing Clance and Chafin's new Psychology of Financial Planning book. And I'm really happy that I have made that choice to incorporate that. And I actually replaced another Clance book with that book. So facilitating financial health for financial advisors is, I think, a really great tool. It's very simple read. The Psychology of Financial Planning just goes in a little bit deeper in that book. So I'm making my students read that book along with our financial therapy theory, research, and practice book in one of my classes.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've never had soul searching recommended on the podcast before, which is good. So we get new ones. I think we might have had Psychology of Financial Planning, although I think that only came out in the last did it come out in the last couple of years?
The Psychology is very new. Like, it came out in the last maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very recent.
I haven't read that one yet, but it keeps on coming up on my LinkedIn and Twitter feed, so I should probably give it a read. And we've had Dr. Clance on our previous thing as well, so I can guarantee that's going to be a good one. Well, thank you so much, Kristy. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. That is all from us, but what we do like to do is we like to give the last word to our amazing guest to say a big thank you for coming on the show. So can you tell our audience where to find you, how to connect with you, and to leave us with any last words of wisdom that you've got as well?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's really the best place to find me, Kristy Archuleta. I think there's actually a couple of Kristy Archuletas, surprising or not. But I'm the one at the University of Georgia. And so Kristy and then Archuleta. And I guess you can see how I spell my name up here on the screen. And then you can also email me at karchuleta@uga.edu. And you can find me on our UGA website. If you go to uga.edu or you go to financialplanning.uga.edu, you can find me there as well. Last words of wisdom is, I think I'm just going to go back to saying, again, we have more resources in this area than we ever have before that are much more accessible than they've ever been before. And so if you have questions about that, just reach out to me or someone that you know. I'm happy to point you in some directions. And this is the wave of the future. I truly believe that this is the future of financial planning, and what we do with the human elements is how we hold value as financial planners. This is where our value comes in, because the technical stuff can be outsourced to robo advisors or to software that we're utilizing. And so this is where we really need to spend the crux of our time. And it's the most important aspect of what we do with our clients, is to care for them.
Amazing. I thought I'd just let that hang in the air for a second, because that is a really lovely way to finish today. Perfect way to finish, actually. So I must say a big thank you to you, Kristy, for coming on today. It's been a pleasure, as always, chatting with you. So that was Kristy Archuleta from the University of Georgia on the NextGen Planners podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, we are on all social media, so please do give us a shout on there. And you can share it with people. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and our website, which is nextgenplanners.co.uk, where you'll find more information about our amazing community of over 1,000 financial service heroes here in the UK and around the world, actually. All the things that we do to help financial planners grow. Our conference, which is coming up, which actually we do have a financial psychology panel at this year's conference, which is brand new for 2023. So that's going to be really, really good. And all the other things that we're up to here at NextGen. And a final thing to say is, if you could just leave us a review, that really helps us to grow the podcast. We are absolutely smashing it in terms of numbers, but it would be really helpful if you guys could just let us know how we are getting on. So a big thank you once again to Kristy for joining us on today's podcast. Thank you guys for listening, as always, and we will see you in the next one. Bye bye.